In 1981, personal computers were a confusing, fragmented frontier. There was no universal standard. You had different machines like the Commodore 64, the Apple II, and early IBM PCs, all running completely different software. If you bought a program for one machine, it absolutely would not work on another. Enter a tiny, relatively unknown company called Microsoft. IBM was rushing to launch its first personal computer, and they needed an operating system fast. Microsoft bought a basic system, tweaked it, and licensed it to IBM as MS-DOS. It wasn't pretty. There were no icons, no mouse pointers, and no windows. You had to type literal text commands into a glowing green or black screen just to open a file. Yet, Microsoft did something genius. They kept the rights to sell MS-DOS to other computer manufacturers too. Soon, dozens of companies started making IBM clones, all running MS-DOS. While competitors like the Amiga and Atari built beautiful, niche systems for gaming and graphics, Microsoft focused on the boring, massive world of office business. By the late 80s, command line text had silently conquered the world, setting the stage for an empire. While Microsoft was dominating offices with text commands, a massive revolution was brewing in California. In 1984, Apple launched the Macintosh with one of the most famous Super Bowl commercials of all time. The Mac changed everything because it introduced the world to the Graphical User Interface, or GUI. Suddenly, you didn't have to code to use a computer. You had a mouse. You had folders that looked like real folders, a trash can, and windows you could drag around the screen. It was intuitive, beautiful, and friendly. Apple's legendary co-founder, Steve Jobs, believed computers should be appliances for everyday people, not just toys for engineers. The Mac was a critical masterpiece, but it ran into a massive business problem. Apple insisted on tightly controlling everything. If you wanted the Mac operating system, you had to buy Apple's expensive, proprietary hardware. This created a luxury ecosystem. It was beloved by artists, designers, and students, but too pricey for the average household. Apple had invented the future, but their refusal to share their software allowed a rival to clone their ideas and steal the mass market. By the early 1990s, Microsoft knew text-based DOS was dying. They needed a true graphical interface to combat Apple. They launched early versions of Windows, but the real earthquake happened on the 24th of August 1995. The launch of Windows 95 was a global cultural phenomenon. Microsoft paid millions to use the Rolling Stones song Start Me Up to advertise their brand new Start menu. People queued around block-outside tech stores at midnight just to buy a piece of software. Windows 95 was a massive leap forward. It beautifully blended the ease of Apple's graphics with the affordable, open ecosystem of MS-DOS clones. It introduced features we still use today, like the taskbar, the recycle bin, and plug-and-play hardware support. Because Windows 95 could run on almost any cheap PC, it utterly crushed the competition. Within a few years, Microsoft secured a staggering 90% of the desktop market share. Tech rivals like OS, 2Warp vanished, and Apple was driven to the absolute brink of bankruptcy. Microsoft hadn't just won the operating system war, they had monopolized the entire personal computing landscape. As we entered the 2000s, computers moved out of the office and straight into the center of the family living room. The internet was exploding, and people needed a rock-solid, secure system to browse the web. In 2001, Microsoft delivered their undisputed masterpiece, Windows XP. With its iconic bright green hill and blue sky wallpaper, XP became the digital backdrop for a generation. It combined the consumer-friendly features of older Windows versions with the stable, crash-resistant architecture used by heavy-duty corporate servers. It was the golden era of desktop computing. People used XP to download MP3s, play early 3D video games, and connect to dial-up internet. XP was so stable and beloved that people flat-out refused to upgrade when Microsoft released its successor, Windows Vista, which was bloated and plagued with bugs. For nearly a decade, XP remained the dominant force on Earth. Microsoft looked entirely invincible. But while they were busy perfecting the desktop computer, they completely missed a quiet shift in consumer behavior. The world was about to move away from desks and into the palms of our hands. In 2007, the tech world changed forever. Steve Jobs stood on a stage in San Francisco and pulled the first iPhone out of his pocket. It wasn't just a new phone. It ran a brand new desktop-class operating system later called iOS. Before the iPhone, mobile operating systems like BlackBerry or Windows Mobile were clunky. They relied on plastic, physical keyboards, stylus pens, and tiny, frustrating drop-down menus. iOS introduced multi-touch technology. Suddenly, you were pinching to zoom into photos, flicking your finger to scroll through music, and tapping visual apps that responded instantly. It made software feel physical. Apple applied the exact same strategy they used in the 1980s. iOS would only run on Apple hardware, but this time the world was wealthier and mobile phones were deeply personal fashion statements. iOS instantly captured the premium, highly lucrative end of the global market. It proved that the future of operating systems wasn't going to be one with mouse clicks, but with thumb swipes. The era of pure PC dominance was officially dead. When Apple launched iOS, Google realized that if Apple controlled mobile software, Google's search engine could be locked out of the future. To prevent this, Google bought a small startup called Android and completely redesigned it to combat the iPhone. But Google did something radically different from Apple. They took a page out of Microsoft's old playbook. They made Android completely open source and gave it away to phone manufacturers for free. If Samsung, HTC, or Motorola wanted to build a smartphone, they didn't have to code an operating system from scratch, they could just use Android. This sparked an absolute wildfire of growth. Within a few short years, Android was running on hundreds of different devices across every single price point, from $50 budget phones in developing nations to $1,000 flagship devices. By the mid-2010s, Android's market share skyrocketed past iOS. Because smartphones vastly outnumber personal computers, Android quietly became the most popular operating system on the entire planet by sheer volume of users, proving that openness almost always wins the mass market. If you look at standard desktop charts, you barely see Linux. It usually hovers around a tiny 2 to 4% market share. But here is the biggest secret in tech. Linux actually runs the entire modern world. Linux is an open source system created in 1991 by a student named Linus Torvalds. He gave it away for free, allowing anyone to modify its code. Because it is incredibly lightweight, modular, and virtually uncrashable, engineers fell in love with it. Today, Linux doesn't care about consumer desktops. Instead, it runs 100% of the world's top 500 supercomputers. It powers the servers behind Google, Netflix, and Amazon. When you access the cloud, you are accessing Linux. Your smart TV, your home Wi-Fi router, and even the computers inside modern cars are almost certainly running a hidden version of Linux. Even Google's Android is fundamentally built on top of the Linux kernel. It is the invisible backbone of global civilization. It may not have the flashy marketing of Windows or Apple, but without it, the modern internet would instantly grind to a halt. As we look at the landscape today, in 2026, the operating system wars have reached a fascinating state of equilibrium. The fierce, destructive battles of the 80s and 90s are over. Instead, we live in a world of specialized ecosystems. Windows remains the undisputed king of desktop productivity, corporate offices, and PC gaming. Apple's macOS and iOS hold a fiercely loyal, incredibly profitable grip on premium laptops and smartphones. Meanwhile, Android dominates global mobile volume, and Linux quietly rules the cloud and smart infrastructure. But the horizon is changing. We are moving away from traditional app-based interfaces. The next great operating system won't care about Windows, files, or mouse pointers. Instead, the future belongs to artificial intelligence and spatial computing. We are seeing systems designed around voice commands, augmented reality glasses, and AI agents that anticipate what you want before you even type it. The past 40 years were about teaching humans how to talk to machines. The next 40 years will be about machines learning how to seamlessly adapt to us.